Can you truly feel the weight of 3,000 years pressing against the palm of your hand as you touch a single block of limestone? Is it possible for a city to be simultaneously a fortress of eternal peace and a theater of endless friction? Why does the dust here seem to carry a different density, as if every particle were a fragmented record of a prayer or a shout? Do you believe that a map drawn in heaven can ever truly fit the chaotic, narrow alleys carved by human desperation on earth? What if everything you were told about the golden serenity of Jerusalem is a beautiful lie designed to mask the raw, grinding mechanics of survival? You arrive expecting a cathedral of silence, a museum of static holiness where time stopped at the edge of a biblical verse. Instead, the first thing that hits you is not incense, but the smell of diesel exhaust mixing with roasted coffee and the damp scent of ancient stone that has never fully dried. This is not a postcard, it is a living, breathing organism of rock. You are walking through the Jaffa Gate, and the transition is violent. The modern world dissolves behind you, replaced by a verticality that feels claustrophobic and expansive all at once. The light here does not just illuminate, it vibrates against the Jerusalem stone, that specific pale calcarenite that the law mandates for every facade, creating a visual unity that hides 1,000 internal divisions. You run your fingers along the wall and feel the texture. It is rough, pitted by erosion and the touch of millions of hands that came before yours. The temperature drops as you move deeper into the shadows of the Muristan, where the air is trapped between walls so thick they hold the cold of a previous century. You hear the rhythmic scrape of leather soles on smooth, slippery basalt pavers, worn down to a polished sheen by the friction of history. There is a specific resonance to this place. Every footstep echoes upward, bouncing off the arches that bridge the streets, creating a persistent hum of movement. You observe the way the sunlight cuts through the narrow gaps above, falling in sharp, diagonal blades that reveal the suspended dust of the souk. It is a structural masterpiece of necessity. These stones were not placed for beauty alone. They were stacked to withstand sieges, to insulate against the brutal Judean sun, and to mark the boundaries of the sacred. You realize that the holiness of Jerusalem is not found in the grand domes you see from afar, but in the functional persistence of these foundations. Every archway is a tension point, every alley a vein through which the lifeblood of the city, its people, flows with a calculated urgency. You see a merchant dragging a wooden crate over stones that might have felt the weight of Roman sandals or Crusader boots. And the distinction between the eras begins to blur. The stability of the city depends on this rigid, mineral continuity. If the stone fails, the identity fails. Yet, there is a profound fragility in this perceived permanence. You notice the cracks, the moss growing in the shaded crevices, the way the iron gates have rusted into the masonry. This is the constant negotiation between the eternal and the ephemeral. You're not just a tourist here, you are a witness to a machine of faith that requires constant maintenance. The logistics of the sacred are mundane. The cleaning of the gutters, the hauling of water to high terraces, the reinforcement of crumbling stairs. As you stand at the threshold of the Christian quarter, looking toward the ramparts that define the horizon, you begin to understand that the true miracle is not the past, but the fact that this complex, overlapping reality still stands today. You came seeking a sign from the heavens, but the earth here speaks much louder. It tells a story of grip, of sweat, and of a relentless commitment to a plot of land that offers no easy comfort. This is the first layer of your descent into the heart of the world. Before we move deeper into the hidden labyrinths and the echoing chambers, where the heartbeat of the three faiths synchronizes in a dissonant harmony, check if you are already subscribed to this channel. This is the only way to ensure you won't lose your way as we navigate the complex psychological and physical layers of the most contested city on the planet, revealing the secrets that tourists never see. You feel the wind pick up, funneling through the stone corridors like a localized gale, carrying the distant chime of bells and the first low vibration of a call to prayer. The atmosphere thickens. The light begins to turn a bruised purple as the sun dips behind the western hills, and the shadows of the stones lengthen until they overlap, erasing the borders between the quarters. You are now part of the architecture. Your presence is another micro-pressure on the pavement, another breath added to the humid air of the vaults. The transition from the physical to the spiritual has begun, not through a sudden revelation, but through the slow, grinding awareness of the material world's weight. You are walking on layers of civilization that have been crushed, rebuilt and crushed again, creating a soil made of memory. The density of the environment becomes a physical weight on your chest, forcing you to slow your pace, to breathe in sync with the city's ancient, labored rhythm. You pass a small window, barely a slit in the thick masonry, and catch the flicker of a single candle inside a room that smells of old parchment and olive oil. The contrast is sharp. The cold, indifferent stone outside and the warm, fragile light within. This is the essence of survival in Jerusalem. Security is found in the thickness of the walls, but meaning is found in what those walls protect. You are moving toward the center of the labyrinth now, where the sounds of the market begin to fade and the silence of the sanctuaries begins to take hold. But this silence is not empty, it is heavy with the expectations of billions. The limestone skin of the city is merely the container for a pressure that has been building for millennia. A tension that holds the entire structure in a state of miraculous, terrifying balance. You look up at the sky, framed by the jagged edges of the rooftops, and realize that you are at the bottom of a well of history, looking up at a world that seems increasingly distant and irrelevant compared to the gravity of the ground beneath your feet. The journey is no longer about distance, it is about depth. You are prepared to go lower, to find the points where the stones meet the spirit and where the mundane becomes a gateway to the absolute. The stone under your hand is no longer just rock. It is a witness, a record, and a warning of what it takes to endure in a place that the world refuses to forget. You leave the relative silence of the stone ramparts behind and plunge into the sensory overload of the souk, where the functional heart of Jerusalem beats with a frantic, rhythmic intensity. Can you distinguish the precise moment when the scent of sacred frankincense is overtaken by the sharp, acidic tang of freshly slaughtered lamb and turmeric? Is the chaos you see a sign of disorder, or is it the most sophisticated form of social architecture ever devised to keep thousands of people from different worlds in a state of productive friction? Why does the merchant selling plastic rosaries under a crusader archway seem to hold more practical authority over this ground than any theologian in a distant land? What if the true peace of Jerusalem is not found in a treaty, but in the exchange of coins for bread across a counter that has existed in the same spot for 8 centuries? You thought you were entering a sanctuary of pure prayer, but you find yourself in a machine of pure commerce, where survival is the only liturgy that everyone understands. The air here is thick, humid, and trapped. It carries the warmth of bodies pressing against bodies in the narrow arteries of the Muslim quarter. You feel the vibration of a wooden cart being pushed over the uneven stones, the wheels rattling against the history beneath them with a sound that mimics a low, persistent drumbeat. To your left, a wall of spices rises in colorful mounds of sumac, za'atar, and cinnamon, their dust coating the back of your throat with a dry, peppery heat. The architecture here is a masterclass in spatial economy. Every centimeter is utilized. Shops are carved into the thick foundations of Byzantine ruins, and residential balconies hang precariously over the heads of shoppers, casting deep, jagged shadows that slice through the midday glare. You notice the light filtering through the corrugated metal roofs of the market, creating a strobe effect as you walk, a flickering cinematic record of movement and trade. The sounds are a layered composition of languages, Arabic gutturals clashing with the melodic vowels of Italian pilgrims and the hurried Hebrew of soldiers on patrol. It is a fragile equilibrium of necessity. The baker needs the tourist needs the history, and the history needs the constant maintenance of the local families who have occupied these vaulted rooms for generations. You witness the contrast between the abundance of the stalls, overflowing with heavy silks, polished brass, and ripe pomegranates, and the stark, minimalist gravity of the doorways leading to hidden courtyards. One step takes you from the shouting of a rug salesman into a pocket of absolute, ancient stillness, where an elderly man sits on a low stool, his face a map of the city's endurance. This is the structural reality of the old city, a labyrinth of privacy protected by a shell of public noise. The stability of this ecosystem depends on a complex web of unwritten rules. Who walks where, who opens their shop at dawn, and which family holds the key to which gate. It is a precarious dance on a high wire of tradition. You see the fragility in the way people avoid eye contact at certain intersections, a subtle navigation of invisible borders that divide the quarters. The security of the city is not just in the soldiers' rifles, but in the predictable patterns of the daily routine. If the bread is not baked, if the water does not flow through the aging pipes, the spiritual tension becomes unbearable. You are observing a city that lives on the edge of its own nerves, yet functions with the precision of a clockwork mechanism. The material reality of the market is the anchor for the metaphysical aspirations of the pilgrims. Without the souk, the holy sites would be empty monuments. The market provides the human electricity that keeps the stones alive. As you navigate this dense thicket of humanity, you realize that your own presence is part of the friction that generates the city's unique heat. You are no longer an outsider looking in. You are a component in the machine, a temporary witness to a coexistence that is as beautiful as it is terrifyingly thin. It is a world where a shared wall can be both a support and a weapon. The sounds of the market suddenly dip as a call to prayer begins to spiral up from a nearby minaret, its minor key resonance filling the stone vaults and momentarily silencing the haggling over the price of leather. In this suspension of time, the gravity of the place becomes overwhelming. You look around at the faces of those who call this stone labyrinth home, and the weight of their persistence hits you. Comment the following phrase if you can feel the pulse of this ancient struggle. Jerusalem is the only place where my soul feels both lost and found. This emotional admission is the key to understanding why millions are drawn to this specific dust, despite the risks and the heat. The sun is now high, baking the limestone rooftops above you and sending a wave of dry heat down into the alleys. You feel the sweat on your neck, the grit of the desert wind under your eyelids, and the relentless pressure of the crowd. The density of the environment begins to feel like a physical embrace, or a cage, depending on the shift of the wind. You see a child running through the legs of the crowd, disappearing into a dark tunnel that likely leads to a Crusader-era cellar, reminding you that there are entire levels of this city that remain hidden from your view. The souk is just the surface, a functional mask for the deeper, more complex strata of faith that lie beneath. You are moving toward the point where the commercial ends and the truly sacred begins. But the transition is blurred. There is no clear line where the market stops and the temple starts. The smoke from a kebab grill drifts into the courtyard of a church, and the sound of a church bell punctuates the silence of a mosque. This is the genius and the curse of Jerusalem. It forces an intimacy that the world finds impossible to replicate elsewhere. You are learning that to survive here, one must master the art of the threshold, knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to simply disappear into the shadow of a stone arch. The city does not ask for your opinion, it demands your adaptation. As you reach the end of the main thoroughfare of the market, the sky opens up slightly, revealing the massive weathered stones of the ancient retaining walls. The scale changes from the intimate to the monumental, and the air becomes cooler, thinner, and more charged with a different kind of electricity. You have passed through the digestive system of the city and are now approaching its nervous center, where the stakes are higher and the history is written in blood and gold. The echo of the souk lingers in your ears, a reminder that before Jerusalem was a symbol, it was, and still is, a place where people buy salt, sell light, and pray for the strength to do it all again tomorrow. The limestone remains indifferent to the drama, absorbing the heat and the noise, waiting for the next layer of time to be laid upon its surface. You are ready to ascend. Can you distinguish where the work of man ends and the bedrock of the divine begins in a city that has been stacked like a deck of cards over 3 millennia? Is it possible that the true Jerusalem is not the one you walk upon, but the hollowed, silent one that exists 20 meters beneath your feet? Why does the air turn metallic and cold as you descend into the Hasmonean tunnels, leaving the sun-drenched chaos of the market for the crushing weight of subterranean history? Do you believe that a single rock can be the literal navel of the world? Or is it merely the anchor point for a gravity created by sheer collective will? What if the vertical distance between a Crusader tomb and a Byzantine cistern is the only true measure of time that matters here? You thought the city was a flat map of 4 quarters, but as you move toward the center, you realize it is a vertical fortress of overlapping claims. You are no longer walking through streets. You are navigating a dense, 3-dimensional puzzle where one person's floor is another person's sacred ceiling. The descent begins in the damp shadows of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the light is filtered through centuries of candle soot and heavy hanging oil lamps. You feel the change in the atmosphere immediately. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and the humid breath of pilgrims who have traveled thousands of miles to touch a cold stone slab. The texture under your boots changes from the polished basalt of the street to the uneven, hollow-sounding marble of the rotunda. You see the contrast between the flickering golden opulence of the Greek Orthodox altars and the raw, unadorned limestone of the tombs below. This is the structural core of the Christian world, a site where the architecture serves as a shell for an absence. You observe the way the massive columns, scarred by fire and earthquake, hold up a dome that seems to float in a haze of blue incense. The stability of this place is a miracle of engineering and diplomacy. It is held together by iron beams and an even more rigid status quo that dictates who may sweep which step and at what hour. You move from this cavernous interior back out into the blinding glare of the afternoon, climbing a set of narrow, external stairs that lead to the rooftops of the city. The transition is jarring. One moment you are in a subterranean womb of faith. The next you are standing on a sea of white limestone domes and satellite dishes, looking out over the Temple Mount. From this height, the functional logic of Jerusalem reveals itself. You see how the city was built to capture every drop of rain, with channels carved into the stone leading to hidden reservoirs. You notice the proximity of the Dome of the Rock, its gold leaf reflecting the sun with a brilliance that seems to vibrate against the deep blue of the ceramic tiles. The spatial relationship between these 2 points, the sepulchre and the rock, is the most charged interval in human geography. They are two poles of an invisible battery, creating a tension that powers the entire region. You feel the wind whipping across the flat roofs, carrying the metallic tang of the desert and the distant, rhythmic clanging of a blacksmith's hammer. The safety of the city from this vantage point feels illusory. You are standing on the crust of a volcano made of memory. To your right, the western wall plunges downward, a massive retaining structure of Herodian masonry that anchors the entire plateau. You see the tiny figures below, pressed against the stone like grains of sand, their movements synchronized in a repetitive, swaying prayer. The scale shift is overwhelming. You are a small biological entity caught between the monumental permanence of the stones and the infinite reach of the sky. This is the vertical sanctity, a hierarchy of layers where the deeper you go, the older the truth becomes, and the higher you climb, the more the divisions seem to blur into a single dusty horizon. The material reality of the city is a constant reminder of its vulnerability. You see the cracks in the walls of the Armenian quarter, the sagging arches of the Jewish quarter, and the way the shadows of the Al-Aqsa Mosque stretch across the valley like a protective hand. If you are beginning to understand that Jerusalem is not a place you visit, but a mountain you must mentally excavate to see clearly, then leave a like on this video to signal that the depth of this narrative is reaching you. This gesture of support helps ensure that these complex layers of history continue to be uncovered for those who seek the truth beneath the surface. The light is changing now, turning a deep ochre yellow as the sun begins its descent toward the Mediterranean coast. You feel the stone beneath your feet radiating the heat it has absorbed all day, a slow release of energy that mirrors the city's own unyielding spirit. The density of the built environment is so great that it seems to bend the light, creating a shimmering effect over the Kidron Valley. You look down into the excavations of the city of David, where archaeologists are currently brushing away the dirt of 25 centuries, and you realize that the city is still growing, not just outward, but downward. Every shovelful of earth is a potential revelation or a potential riot. The balance is that delicate. You are standing on a platform of high-stakes survival, where the architecture is the only thing that remains after the empires have crumbled into the dust. The contrast between the fragile human life in the alleys and the indifferent massive blocks of the foundation is the central theme of this landscape. You see a priest in black robes crossing a courtyard, followed by a group of soldiers in olive drab, followed by a merchant carrying a tray of sweets. Their paths cross in a vertical intersection of time and intent. The city does not resolve its contradictions, it merely stacks them. You breathe in the dry, cooling air and feel a sense of profound vertigo, not from the height, but from the realization of how much history is pressing up against your souls. You are prepared now to move from the structural to the biological, to see how the people themselves have become part of the city's living masonry. The journey through the levels has stripped away the superficial, leaving only the raw, vertical reality of a place that refuses to be buried. The gold of the dome flares one last time before the shadows of the hills swallow it, and you turn to descend back into the labyrinth, carrying the weight of the heights and the depths within you. The city is a lung, and you are the breath moving through its ancient stony chambers. Can you survive a day in a place where every drop of water is a political statement and every shadow is a fought-over sanctuary? Is it possible that the rituals you observe are not merely acts of piety, but biological defense mechanisms against the brutal, unforgiving sun of the Judean desert? Why does the rhythm of the city change so drastically when the heat reaches its peak, turning the streets into a landscape of strategic stillness? Do you believe that a community can be held together by the sheer force of shared hardship? Or is the architecture of faith the only thing preventing a total collapse into the dust? What if the most sacred act in Jerusalem is not the prayer itself, but the persistence of the body that performs it under the weight of history? You move through the afternoon heat, and the air feels like a physical barrier, a shimmering wall of gold and grit that slows your pulse. The limestone, which felt so solid and cooling in the morning, now radiates a fierce, dry energy that makes your skin tighten. You are witnessing the ritual of survival, a complex social and biological choreography that has been refined over thousands of years. In the Jewish quarter, you see the residents navigating the narrow passages with a calculated economy of motion, moving from one patch of shade to the next like sailors hopping between islands in a scorching sea. The architecture here is functional in its most primal sense. The high walls and overhanging balconies are not just aesthetic choices, but vital tools for temperature control. You feel the texture of the air change as you enter a shaded archway. It is a sudden, sharp relief, a microclimate of survival carved out of the rock. The social structure mirrors this physical reality. Families are clustered into tight, defensive units, their lives overlapping in courtyards, where the sound of children playing is muffled by thick stone walls. You observe the water tanks on the roofs, a modern layer of the ancient struggle to harvest life from a barren landscape. The stability of the city depends on this constant, quiet management of resources. There is no abundance here, only a highly organized form of scarcity. You see a woman carrying a heavy tray of bread, her pace steady and unhurried, embodying the endurance required to exist in a place that offers no easy comfort. The contrast between the vulnerability of the human form and the indifference of the burning landscape is staggering. Every gesture, from the way a merchant adjusts his awning to the precision with which a soldier sips from a canteen, is part of a larger, invisible machine of maintenance. If you are starting to see that Jerusalem is a masterclass in how humanity adapts to the impossible, share this video with someone who values the deep, hidden mechanics of history and culture. By sharing, you help expand the circle of those who understand that this city is more than a symbol. It is a living testament to human resilience. The atmosphere in the Muslim quarter during the height of the day is a study in thermal endurance. The narrowness of the streets, which feels claustrophobic to a stranger, is actually a brilliant structural defense against the vertical sun. You feel the rhythm of the city shift as shops partially close their heavy iron shutters, and the frenetic energy of the morning gives way to a heavy, expectant quiet. This is not laziness. It is a ritualized preservation of energy. You watch an old man sitting in the doorway of a spice shop, his eyes half closed, his breath shallow and rhythmic. He is part of the stone, a biological extension of the limestone skin you touched earlier. The survival of the community is tied to this ability to become still, to wait out the heat, and to find meaning in the endurance. In the Christian quarter, the thick walls of the monasteries provide a different kind of sanctuary. You hear the faint, cool echo of a chant drifting from a high window, a sound that seems to lower the temperature of the street by its mere presence. The faith here is not an abstract concept. It is the structural glue that holds the social fabric together when the physical environment becomes too harsh to bear. You see the fragility of this existence in the way the dust settles on everything, on the icons, on the vegetables in the market, on the faces of the pilgrims. It is a reminder that without the ritual, without the constant repetition of the sacred and the mundane, the city would be reclaimed by the desert in a generation. The tension between the need for security and the reality of risk is palpable in every intersection. You notice the way people watch the horizon, sensitive to the slightest change in the wind or the tone of the crowd. This heightened awareness is a survival trait, a sharp collective intuition developed through centuries of living at the crossroads of empires. The city is a pressure cooker of intent, And the only way to prevent it from bursting is the rigid adherence to the patterns of the past. You feel the weight of this responsibility as you walk, the sense that you are treading on a surface that requires constant, vigilant care. The limestone under your feet is worn smooth, not just by feet, but by the friction of a million daily battles for space, light, and water. As the sun finally begins to lose its lethal edge, the city starts to breathe again. The shadows stretch out, cooling the stones and inviting the people back into the open. You see the first signs of the evening's revival, the smell of charcoal being lit, the sound of shutters being flung open, the sudden increase in the volume of voices. The ritual of survival has been completed for another day, and the city has once again proven its ability to endure the unendurable. You are left with a profound sense of the cost of this permanence. It is paid for in sweat, in patience, and in an unwavering commitment to a specific, difficult patch of earth. You are moving toward the final revelation, the point where all these physical and social layers converge into a single, transcendent meaning. The stones are cooling now, turning a soft, bruised grey in the twilight, and you feel the city's heartbeat stabilize, ready for the transition from the biological struggle to the eternal threshold. You have witnessed the mechanics of life in the most contested city on earth, and you realize that the miracle is not that the walls are holy, but that they are still inhabited. As the sun finally descends behind the Judean hills, bleeding a deep crimson across the jagged horizon of Jerusalem, can you feel the physical transition from a city of stone to a city of light? Is it possible that the limestone skin you touched, the chaotic echoes of the market, and the vertical layers of sanctity were merely the scaffolding for a much larger, invisible structure? Why does the air suddenly feel lighter, yet more charged, as if the collective breath of millions were lifting the very foundations of the old city toward the stars? Do you believe that a place can be both a graveyard of empires and the cradle of an eternal hope that refuses to be buried under the dust of history? What if the true significance of Jerusalem is not found in the ownership of its gates, but in the universal threshold it represents between the finite human struggle and the infinite reach of the divine? You stand now on a high vantage point, perhaps near the Mount of Olives, watching the golden lights of the city flicker on like a mirrored reflection of the celestial map above. The physical barriers that seemed so insurmountable during the heat of the day, the walls, the checkpoints, the iron-bolted doors, now seem to dissolve into a singular glowing tapestry of human persistence. You realize that the stability of Jerusalem is not maintained by the strength of its masonry, but by the relentless, shared commitment to the sacred. The contrast you observed between the abundance of faith and the scarcity of space has been elevated into a profound lesson in coexistence. In this blue hour, the sounds of the bells, the adhan, and the prayers at the wall do not compete. They weave together into a dissonant, yet strangely harmonious symphony of belonging. The material world has served its purpose as a container for this intangible energy. You feel the cool breeze of the evening brushing against your face, carrying the scent of pine and the ancient, lingering cold of the desert night. The city beneath you is no longer just a collection of quarters or a labyrinth of functional survival. It has become a symbol of the human condition itself, fragile, divided, yet anchored by an unyielding desire for meaning. The stones are no longer just building blocks. They are witnesses to the fact that beauty can be forged from friction and that holiness is often a byproduct of endurance. You see the light reflecting off the dome of the rock and the distant silhouette of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and you understand that these structures are the physical anchors for a vertical longing that connects every observer to a shared past and a speculated future. The journey you have taken through the layers of this city has not been a movement through space, but a descent into the core of what it means to seek the absolute in a world made of dust. The limestone has taught you about grip, the souk has taught you about rhythm, and the vertical levels have taught you about the depth of human memory. Now, at this eternal threshold, you are left with the realization that Jerusalem is not a destination to be reached, but a state of mind to be inhabited. It is the place where the concrete meets the symbolic, and where the mundane act of walking a street becomes a pilgrimage through time. The city's true architecture is composed of the hopes, fears, and prayers of those who have refused to let its flame go out. You are now part of that continuity. Your gaze is the latest in a line of billions who have looked upon these same walls and seen a reflection of their own search for a home that transcends the physical. The density of the environment has transformed into a density of meaning. As the stars begin to sharpen in the clear desert sky, the weight of the city feels not like a burden, but like a foundation. You have seen how a city can be a machine of faith, a fortress of history, and a sanctuary of survival, all while remaining a simple dusty town on a ridge of limestone. This is the ultimate elevation, the understanding that the sacred is not separate from the stone, but is found within the very way the stone is handled, defended, and loved. The legacy of Jerusalem is not written in its destructions, but in its persistent rebuildings. You are standing at the edge of the world, looking into a mirror of the human soul. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel to continue exploring the deep connections between history, architecture, and the human spirit in our upcoming documentaries. If you watched until here it is because you liked this case, leave a comment saying, "I watched until here," so that I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. This simple act connects you to a community of explorers who seek the truth beneath the surface of the world's most iconic landscapes. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if this journey through the heart of Jerusalem has shifted your perspective on the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. Share this documentary with those who seek a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world, so that the echoes of these ancient stones can reach a new generation of witnesses. The night has fully claimed the valley now, and the city glows with a quiet, fierce intensity that defies the darkness. You turn away from the view, but the weight of the limestone stays with you, a permanent mark on your memory. The threshold has been crossed, and the city remains, an eternal sentinel waiting for the dawn of a new age, carved in stone and bathed in light. You carry the silence of the sanctuaries and the noise of the markets within you, a balanced reminder of the complexity of the sacred. The journey ends here, but the reflection continues, as steady and enduring as the walls that have seen it all before and will see it all again. Jerusalem is not just a city, it is a promise kept in stone.